Good evening. I'll call this meeting of the Board of Selectmen to order. It's January 25th, 2006, I was 19, 2016, and all select members are present. If you would all join me and stand, I will ask Selectwoman O'Connell to start us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We have Treasury warrants to approve, transmitting of Treasury warrants 29, 29A, 30, and 30A. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion has been made
Second.
and seconded. Is there discussion? I see none. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. We have no minutes to approve, so we'll jump right into our scheduled 7 o'clock appointment with Malak Solomon, St. Moses Incorporated, doing business as Rizzo's Roast Beef, to request and obtain a common victuals license for property located at 3 Church Street, Units 1 and 2. Mr. Solomon? Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Welcome. Thanks for
Thank
being
you.
here tonight. So I'll just turn it over to you if you want to briefly summarize what brings you to us.
Well, me and my brothers, I have 2 brothers, we've been doing this business for over 15 years. We've been seeking another opportunity since our family are expanding and we're all married and we have kids. So Mr. Rizopoulos, he has a very, very good chance for us just to keep going in this business. So that's going to be our 3rd store.
Very well. So it's a change of ownership at Rizzo's. Is that what's happened here, or?
At transferring, yes, transferring
okay.
common victual license.
Jeff, recommendations?
Recommendation from Al Spalding, the building inspector, after review and consideration of the town of Wilmington bylaws and all applicable codes, I have no outstanding zoning issues with the above-mentioned business. Recommendation from Shelley Newhouse, health director. I recommend approval of the application for common victualers license submitted by Malik Solomon, St. Moses, Inc., DBA Rizzo's Roast Beef and Pizza, located at 3 Church Street, Units 1 and 2.
Thank you. I'll open it up for questions from the board, if anyone has any observations or comments to make.
Yes, I just asked the question when you expect to have the change in ownership and management.
Well, we were planning between tomorrow and the 1st of February.
So imminently anyways.
Yeah.
Well, I don't have any questions based on what's before us, so good luck.
Thank you.
Good luck with you.
Thank you.
All set? All right, so I guess that being said, no other questions or comments. I would accept a motion.
I make a motion to grant the request common victual license, Unit 1 and Unit 2, located at 3 Church Street for Rizzo's Roast Beef and Pizza.
Motion has been made
Second.
and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. Good luck. Good luck. Jumping to our 7:10 scheduled appointment with Mary Delay, Superintendent of Schools, and Sharon George, our town clerk, to discuss the proposed change to polling locations. Mary, good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome.
Yes, thank you.
Do I see? Hi, Sharon. Okay, Sharon is here. Very well. So I will allow you to take the floor and make your case, and I guess we'll open it up for discussion upon conclusion.
Great, thank you. Well, first of all, I wanted to just apologize for not being in attendance at the last meeting. Certainly was willing to be in attendance, but certainly happy to have the opportunity. So thank you for allowing me to present. And based on what I saw and read, I think it's helpful to have the opportunity to kind of hear from our perspective at the school department in terms of what led to this request for possible change in the polling locations. As you know, way back when, 19 months ago, when I started this position and I went through a whole entry plan process, had the opportunity to speak to a number of constituents, one of a group of constituents that I spoke to obviously were the early childhood folks. So this would be the staff at the Early Childhood Center, the early childhood directors, and actually Jen Mahan and Charlotte Phillips, our two early childhood directors, are here with us today, as well as Mrs. Kane and Mrs. Burns from the school committee. And the concerns that were raised at that time were around, specifically around safety, the safety of using those two schools as polling locations. And from the perspective that I was hearing were concerns around sort of public access, the level of access granted to the building when polling was in session. Specifically, for example, at the Wildwood School, the bathroom that is closest to the cafetorium where the voting occurs is also a bathroom that is used by students, and there is no other separate facility for the public to utilize. So that's the bathroom that's utilized during the polling times. In the case of the Beltwell School, given its circular nature, which I know you're all familiar with from this building, it gives opportunities for those who are in attendance to exit doors other than the main doors, and sometimes they've tended to wander throughout the corridors and have access to the classrooms. So certainly safety was something that I had heard about. The issues with respect to the level of traffic. So if there was school in session, the traffic through the parking lot, combined with kids entering and exiting the school, possibly for recess or for pickup and drop-off, and some of the concerns there. I know that there was a significant discussion about, and I suppose the history at some level, from what I'm understanding, is that preschool and kindergarten is non-compulsory, so therefore one of the ideas is you just cancel school at the two early childhood centers on that day, thereby removing any of the safety concerns. At times, I think that there have been times when the polling has occurred while school has been in session, and kids would basically just have their lunches in the classroom rather than going to the cafeteria, because cafeterias were being used for voting. And that situation actually does not present itself any longer as a result of a policy adoption around life-threatening food allergies at the preschool, in particular, the preschool level, the early childhood level, where essentially we don't allow any food, we don't allow lunches to be served in the classrooms. We allow lunches to be served in the cafeteria because certain safety precautions are taken in the cafeteria around potential exposure to allergens by children, but we don't allow that to happen. And in fact, when they have their snack breaks in the classroom, those snacks are actually checked by the staff to ensure that those products don't contain any allergens, any peanut-containing products. That doesn't occur at all the grade levels, because obviously as students get older, they essentially are more independent and they're able to manage their own food allergies. So for example, at the high school, you don't see those restrictive guidelines in place because students already know how to manage their allergies, so that's not an issue. I guess in terms of the argument regarding non-compulsory education, I guess one of the things that concerns us is that while the state has not yet made kindergarten compulsory, and certainly nor preschool, it doesn't mean that we want to necessarily just kind of cancel those days of school. The preschool and the kindergarten grade levels in Massachusetts actually have curriculum standards, believe it or not. Even at the preschool, there are curriculum frameworks in place for those grade levels. There are 177, I believe, school days in the early childhood calendar, and the school district has invested, even prior to my coming here, a significant amount of money in curriculum for both the preschool and the kindergarten. Somewhere to the tune of $60,000, $70,000 worth of curriculum investments at the early childhood level. And that curriculum takes that 177 days to implement. And when you start taking days away from the calendar, it becomes very challenging for teachers to maintain and stay on the pace for what they're trying to do. In addition, there are a whole host of assessments that we offer that have to do with the social emotional domain, cognitive domains, trying to assess that children at that grade level are making progress. And again, that progress is measured, and those assessments are actually, the results of those assessments are actually reported to the state. So there's a certain amount of, believe it or not, pressure, if you will, to make sure that the social emotional aspects are being addressed and the curriculum standards are being addressed in that time. So we don't take the canceling of a school day at that grade level, the elimination of a school day, lightly for that reason. For this particular school year, the cancellation of school on May 1st due to the primary, again, not taken lightly. We do have preschool parents who pay tuition to attend, and by canceling school, those parents now will need to find alternate arrangements for daycare for those students, because we will not be having school. They're already paying a tuition for those 177 days. We haven't had anybody clamoring for a day's refund, but certainly, we're concerned about sort of just doing that. Proactively, could we cancel, eliminate that and avoid that situation? Yes, it wouldn't change our tuition structure, but as I mentioned before, we don't see, even though the state treats it as non-compulsory, we don't treat those 177 days any differently than the 180 days that our kids in grades 1 through 12, which is compulsory go to school. So those are some of the predominant reasons. I think that also when we first engaged in the conversation with Mrs. George and the town manager, we thought, and actually George Hooper as well, we thought that there was actually a potential for cost savings from consolidating the polling location at potentially Wilmington High School. The size of the gymnasium is greater than the size of the two cafetorium gymnasiums combined, so there's actually more room in the high school gymnasium than what you have in the two locations. So I guess for that reason, we were thinking this might be perhaps a win-win across the board, that it would actually potentially be some cost savings there. So I certainly did not want to imply that we care less about the safety of high school students. Those students are older, they're bigger, they aren't as easy to kind of scoop out and carry away, and they are self-sufficient, and they manage their food allergies and other threats that come to them around life-threatening food allergies and allergens in a much different way than the younger students do. So those were sort of our rationale, but again, this really came from feedback that was expressed to me, not anything I certainly solicited, but concerns that were raised to me as I transitioned into this role, that I felt that I had an obligation to at least bring forward to see if there was a mutually satisfactory way to address those concerns.
Thank you. Again, appreciate you being here tonight. I know this was before us a couple weeks ago, and I think we all pretty much felt that it was necessary and important to sort of delay coming to any conclusion until we had the opportunity to hear from you and speak to you, and I'm sure that there's going to be some questions. So, so thank you. I'm going to refrain. I had a question, but I'm going to let it sort of stew, and I guess I'll open it up to the board. I don't know, Judy, if you want to. I'll start to my left.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for being here. I certainly was advocating for this opportunity for you to come before the board, so I'm pleased to have you here, as well as the other members that are in the meeting. Some of my concerns I expressed to Sharon directly regarding voter confusion and just some of the other administrative tasks of making the change from a town perspective. Other board members had spoken that night, and certainly they would have the opportunity to speak this evening as well, brought up some valid concerns about parking and handicap and things like that. So I want to be supportive of any of these ideas, and I'm open and receptive. I have mixed feelings about it, just putting that out to you in a very direct way. I understand the goals and objectives that you're trying to achieve. I'm a little concerned about having such a high amount of people and traffic, especially in light of this being a major, year for elections, that I'm concerned about putting, a potential of 8,000 people in a high school, no matter the size of it, with student population in there at the same time. I'm also concerned about how people with any sort of physical challenges are going to be able to navigate to get to the building and it be accessible. I want to see how the discussion goes. I don't want to spot you or the school committee members that are here, but I'm interested in potentially getting any sort of feedback, positive or negative, that you may have received from the school committee regarding this proposal, and did you discuss it with them, which I'm assuming that you did, and if you could share any data points that you might want to add in that regard.
Sure. In terms of, just wanted to address, in terms of the November election, we have historically used the November election day as our full-day PD day for staff, so there, no school is in session. And we didn't do that this year for a very specific reason related to the implementation of our new elementary math curriculum and need to front-load the PD. But we are intending to return to that next year and every year thereafter. And in fact, there's a concerted effort by a number of neighboring districts to use that same day as a PD day, so that we can collaborate with other districts around and share expenses and share ideas around collaboration. So the November election day, we would anticipate there would be no school. So whether it was at the Boutwell, the Wildwood, or the high school, there would not be the student population there. In the event that the election occurred, say, like a primary, like what's happening on March 1st, what we would plan to do with respect to logistics is we would have all staff and students park over on the Swain Street lot, which is what we did when we were under construction, and there are more than enough spaces there to accommodate students and staff. We have about 108 staff, and they parked over there before in combination with the students. So we would ask the staff to park over there, and that would free up all 146 spaces that were available in the front of the school for anybody. And, that would be a logistical decision about, do we want to reserve those? Obviously, there's a significant number of handicapped accessible spots there already, but a decision could be made, for example, to have parking for folks who have mobility challenges there. Across the way, where there would be no students, there would still be about 400 spaces available for people coming to vote, as well as potentially, the Wildwood lot. So, it felt like the complex itself in that area has sufficient parking to accommodate that. With respect to the school committee, we did take this before the school committee, not that they needed to actually vote in any formal, official way, because that's obviously your purview, but took it to them to get a read on their level of support and asked them to take a vote. And there were 6 members present that evening. 4 voted to support. 2 did not vote to support. Their rationale for not supporting was they just felt that there were a number of unanswered questions that remained around logistical issues. But in terms of the 4 that voted, I think the safety concerns were, to speak for them, what primarily motivated that decision, and the desire to not have to necessarily reduce the school year for the early childhood centers.
The other thing that I would just say, and it's hard, I think, to measure, but, change is difficult in general, but it, certainly I think that it's a fact of life. But the other thing is that, when you have large crowds of people in a concentrated area, that, in my opinion, I think we have some heavy traffic in town. I don't want, annually it's been reported that, we report low voter turnout. And I just don't want a large concentration of people coming to a centralized location. People say it's just too complicated to go and vote, because I don't want to deal with the people, I don't want to deal with the traffic, and I don't want to deal with the parking. So I do, in my opinion, feel that that may be a valid concern, but I want to just thank you once again for being here. I'd like to hear what some of my other colleagues have to say, and I'd like to reserve the right to re-engage if I have another question.
Of course.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah,
Thank
Mr.
you.
McCoy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate, Superintendent, you being here and explaining to what you would like to do. And I'll be totally honest, I have to agree to disagree. Relative to the safety, I hear you say that, I know we live in a sex society today, there's no question about it. And for you to say that it's a lot easier to pick up a young kid as opposed to a high school student, I believe all lives matter, number one.
You talk about food allergies. You have a special area in the cafeteria where it's monitored. Well, what better monitoring would you have in a classroom where a student's sitting there with a 2-square-foot table they're by themselves? You don't have to worry about anybody walking by them. And as a teacher, I'll be honest, I think I've got a little bit more faith in our Wilmington Police Department and the school teachers other than yourself. I think the Wilmington Police does an outstanding job safety. I mean, we don't know what happens when we walk out that window door. We don't know. You know, I mean, we can't always live in fear. But I've been in this community a long time, and I think the majority of folks, the taxpayers who foot the bill in this community, when they go vote, they'll either vote early morning before work, but majority of them would vote after work. And I think the concentration, I would hope to think that the clerk, I don't know if she has the numbers, but I would assume majority of folks in this community vote after work. So basically, there's no kids in school at the prime times, but there are students, and I can understand your concerns are valid, you know, but, I mean, if you really think about it, if you have no school, then there's no problem. And I can't support what you're looking to do. I think we're going to make a major disruption. So if we cancel school once every 4 years or twice every 4 years, what's the issue? You have students that are out of sick with the flu. Are they not going to graduate? Of course they're going to graduate. And I understand you saying some parents probably pay preschool. I wasn't even aware of that. Well, you know, we pay taxes, so every student going to school, we're paying tax, so we're not asking for a rebate. They're not asking a rebate if the kids can't be in school. You know, so I can't really support it. I just think it's kind of foolish, this request, and I understand that, but I can't support that. It makes no sense, no logic to me for us to do it. Cancel school, and there's no problem. You know, but I've got faith in the police department, you know, keep an eye on the safety of our kids, and it just doesn't make sense to me to do this. And I know it wasn't a unanimous support from the school committee, and at least I give credit to the school members, you know, that didn't support that. You know, I mean, and I understand, I'm a reasonable person, but once again, I just don't want to disrupt the voters. And we're going to have thousands of folks at the high school. That is disaster written all over the wall, as far as I'm concerned. Cancel school, the teachers have a professional day, it's written in the contract. I think that's the best solution, you know, so that's how I feel. I really, you know, and I wanted to hear what you had to say, and I just have to come out and, you know, and I got to give Luke credit, because Luke did say the last time, you know, high school students' lives just as important as young kids, and I'll say all lives matter, you know, so just to let you know that, but I'd be happy to, you know, let the other membership say how they feel, but that's where I'm coming from, and,
Yeah, if I could just address that, because I take umbrage to the notion that I don't feel that the safety of all kids matter. So I just want to make it just crystal clear that the safety of all my children in Wilmington Public Schools matters to me as much as it does to each one of you, not one iota less. So I want to make that very clear.
I'm glad I heard it, because about 10 minutes ago, I didn't hear that, just to let you know, so.
Well, what I
Thank
said
you.
was that when it comes to food allergies, there is a different level of you know, concern with the early childhood students because they can't manage their own food allergies. And what I said was when it comes to relative safety with respect to a child being abducted, the more vulnerable population is certainly, we can all agree, is the early childhood. I did not say that all populations are not at risk, but that's the more vulnerable population. So I want to make it very clear that I don't want anyone leaving here thinking that I am not as equally protective of
I'm
all
glad you
my
said it,
children in
but
the
10 minutes ago,
schools.
you didn't say that. That's why I had to say what I said. That's not exactly what you said 10 minutes ago, but I'm glad you turned around and realized that. Thank you.
I'll go to Mr. McCoy. Yeah, Mr. Smagia.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. I think one of the things I was questioning was I have not given up faith on humanity totally, but the safety of the children, all of them, is obviously paramount in this conversation. So I think instead of introducing more strangers, and not strangers, but different people into a school environment that usually wouldn't be there while any students are there, kind of, you know, worries me. So I think just closing those two schools, you know, we know when the elections are years in advance, or, you know, a year in advance, and the town clerk can schedule, or you can work with the schedule of the town clerk and when they're going to be closed. And I just think it would be just an easy enough fix to, and I understand what you're saying about the curriculum and all that, but I just think that why introduce the general public to another school when we're trying to alleviate, and I thank you or whoever brought this to your attention to bring it up to us. Because I think it's something that, quite frankly, we probably should have addressed a while ago.
Yeah, and I just wanted to also address the fact that they actually don't have another full-day PD day in their school calendar. The teachers work 182 days. 2 of those are full-day PD days. One of them is the one in the fall, and the other one is the day before school. So by all rights, anytime we close a school, that's subject to negotiation in terms of how that day gets used. I just wanted to clarify. It doesn't automatically mean it gets used as a PD day. That's subject to bargaining, obviously.
Thank you. Yeah.
Mr. Newhouse?
Yeah, I too, first of all, would thank you for coming in, and I know that, from my perspective, members of the board had formed an opinion, the thought that it was fair and made sense to have you come in case, anything that, any information that you had might kind of change our opinion. My sense of it is, first of all, I defer to yourself and to the school committee with the decisions that have been made relative to the policy. I totally get, the focus and the concern that the department has with, with allergies and the safety of students. Obviously, we all share that concern. So I'm not, I don't take any, exception to that. I totally understand where that's coming from. I do think that there is there's a price to be paid from the municipal side in terms of voter confusion, in terms of voter convenience, in terms of the logistics of parking. And I could kind of rehash a couple of points that were made at the last meeting, but honestly, I'd rather just acknowledge that when it comes down to it, and I hear your point about the 177 days for pre-K and for K school. I hear your point that it may not be mandated to be 180 days, but that's the academic school year that's been established, and that you want to strive to meet that. And I appreciate that advocacy. When I weigh that against, what I, in the end, conclude to be not an improvement merely for the polling, for the voting, for the logistics. In the end, I view it to be not an improvement, but less convenient, less efficient, and just weighing those out at the end of the day, I say, I come down on the side of preserving the status quo and what we do. I'm also, I know that when Mrs. George was in here the last time, she noted that we should be expecting a mandated change based on some trends and some projected increases in population that we're likely in the next few years to have to create another precinct. And to me, to make changes when that change may be, changes may be required in the next few years, may become necessary, now is probably not the time to change the status quo when we might have to change it all over again a few years from now. So for all of those reasons, and again, not being surprised at the advocacy of the school administration and the school committee, I think just in the end we weigh these things out, and for one, I just come down on the side of preserving the status quo.
Thank you, Mike. So that leaves it in my turn, I guess, to chat. One of the questions I had was where the school committee was, and I remember that there had been discussion at one of your meetings a month or so ago that I did watch, but I couldn't remember how the vote went, so I appreciated you sharing that, and I think that was asked by my colleague Judy just a few moments ago. I have a gut feeling that at the high school, the parking in the, I don't know, I guess in the high school parking lot on the side of the building, which I guess is the front, I don't know what we call that parking lot, but the primary parking lot, which would be where during the election day, that parking would be there. Folks would be walking in and you mentioned it is a school day, so there'd be stanchions, and I imagine public safety folks would be working, as well as volunteers or poll workers. And so voters would have to walk through the cafeteria and make their way ultimately into the gymnasium. And so my knee-jerk sort of gut reaction to that is, it seems like a long way to go. And maybe it's consistent with the same amount of space that they have to walk at the Boutwell and Wildwood, but that just seems like a fair distance, and a lot of folks kind of exchanging back and forth. I'm wrestling, I really am, I'm wrestling with supporting the proposal because of the recommendations of our town clerk and because of the observations that you, in your professional opinion, have made. And I take those very, very seriously as a member of this board and as a resident in the community. At the same time, I have this big picture thing in my head that I'm wrestling with, and I don't want to, as Mr. Newhouse articulately put it, upset the status quo and have any kind of effect on chilling voter turnout at a time when I think we probably all would agree we want to advance and increase voter turnout as much as possible. So, you know, I feel like if there was something seriously broken in the existing status quo process and our hands were tied and we had to make a change, I think that I'd be more receptive to this change. But I don't feel like this fix, if you will, is commensurate with the break. I don't feel like we're as broken or broken enough to warrant the fix that's being proposed. And that's, I think, where my head is coming down on this, that I think we'll probably have to, this board, whoever the members are on it, at some future date, will have to wrestle with this again, probably sooner than later. And I, like my colleague, Mr. Newhouse, I think it probably behooves us to delay that until that time and leave it alone. Notwithstanding, I recognize that canceling school for those couple of days is not the ideal scenario from a school perspective, but from my perspective on this board, I feel like that's the lesser of the evils that we're being presented with. So I think that's how I'm probably going to go. But yeah, please, Jeff.
I would just point out again, as I did the last time we met on this, that I believe that the town, between the town clerk's office and the police, that we can manage this if this polling location were to change. There's no question that people are, in some cases, change can be inconvenient. But you know, the fact of the matter is there have been changes over the years with polling places. At one time, apparently, polling was done at the Shriners. There was a time when the polling was done all at the high school. Then the West was used, and then more recently the Boutwell and the Wildwood. So, you know, I think with the advance notice that we would be giving residents between all the various outlets, social media, print media, there would be a tremendous amount of information that would be put out to the electorate as to where the polling places, the polling place would be. So I understand there's concern about impacting voter turnout, but I think from the standpoint of getting the word out, I think we can certainly do that. The September primary, I think will be, unfortunately, a light turnout. That'll be, to the extent that there are any tweaks to the system, so to speak, that we need to make as a result of that. I think that'll be a test run, if you will, and that we could be prepared for the November election at the high school.
Thank you, Jeff. Sharon, I see you took, yeah, please.
I just wanted to make a clarification that state elections only happen every other year. So in every 4 years, you have 3 state elections, presidential primary, September, November. But beyond the 4 years, so every other year, On the off year, in 2018, it'll be the governor's race, but there will only be 2 elections, one in September and one in November.
Okay.
And again, I'm willing, as to how you vote, willing to make it work, whichever you choose to go.
I'm reluctant to do this, but to heck with it, I'm going to do it anyway. To Chief Pagonis, so I know you're in the room, sir, so I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I apologize for not I hate to blindside you with the question. The notion of reducing the number of polling locations from, I guess, from the Boutwell and the Wildwood, and having those consolidated into the high school, does that at all have an impact on you in terms of allocation of your personnel and resources? Do you foresee that having a positive or a negative impact, or does that make any change to how you would engage your day?
The one request I did get from Madam Clerk was to add a police officer to cross folks at the town common, which would be an additional individual. I think that obviously we have to have 1 police officer in each of the polling places. So I guess the net on that is that there wouldn't be any reduction. The fact that it's new and it's different would obviously cause a certain amount of concern for planning and trying to make sure that it all works fluidly. It's just handling the traffic flow and the changes and trying to explain to people where they need to go, how they need to work out.
And again, sorry for blindsiding you with that, Chief, but thank you for that.
Yeah, Mike.
Yeah, please.
Just a quick comment. I mean, I've lived in Wilmington for about over 56 years, and many of the select people up here have lived in town almost of their lives. I know from 4:30 to 6:30, from Wilmington Center by the high school, Middlesex Ave and Church Street, on a good day, traffic's an issue. Can you imagine if we have all the polling at Wilmington High? I believe some folks are going to say, forget this, I'm not even going to vote. And as much as people take the time to vote, I would hope to think they would vote. I think you're going to see that. So on a good day, traffic's crazy as it is. Give that day all the polling at that school, or majority of the polling, all that traffic. And I just want to say, for information purposes, I was chairman in the early 2001 in that area, and I know the Education Reform Act, you're limited to what you can do, but economy was tough back then, and it wasn't just me. Town manager Mike Cairo was involved. It was a big question about keeping that Boutwell school open for kindergarten. And not just me, I was chairman. I made that a priority as a selectman, and the board worked that. The town manager did a great job. We opened up that Boutwell school, and I want folks to know, on time, on budget, without a Prop 2.5. So that was a priority of the Board of Selectmen as well as myself, to make sure that school was open for our kids. I just want folks to know that, because we've always pumped in over $1 million by our town manager, then up to Jeff, well above and beyond what the school was looking for many years. So we're not anti-education, we're pro-education. But the good folks need to know that. And I was kind of surprised. I didn't know there was a fee for kindergarten. I didn't even know that.
There's not a fee for kindergarten, it's a fee for preschool.
Preschool.
Yeah, Wilmington has,
All right.
I believe, always had free, publicly funded, I don't mean free
Yeah.
because somebody's
No,
paying,
like
but
I said, I
publicly
respect you
funded.
being here and everybody, but, like I said, traffic.
Yeah,
Madam
and
Chair,
the
if I
only,
could
the
just-
rationale for that proposal was just actually because I was told that in the past, elections were held at Wilmington, so
They were.
I had assumed that had been managed at some point in time. So, I just want to say, like, my obligation is to bring forth the concerns. That's what the school committee hires me for, is to be attentive to the concerns raised by my constituents. I understand that you as a board have to balance competing demands, but I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't bring it forward. I'm not discouraged per se by the decision, but I will say that I think I am discouraged that some of the conversation seems to imply that perhaps there might be a lack of understanding about how things actually operate in our schools, and maybe that's up to me to provide more education. But things around food allergies and what happens in the classroom, what can happen in the classroom, what doesn't, around PD days, and et cetera, that's discouraging. But the fact that you need to balance competing priorities and come down on the side that best, supports what you need to do, I understand that, but that's.
Just to make one clarification, the proposal was to have 4 of the 6 precincts. So we've not looked at the prospect of having all of the residents vote at the high school. Precincts 5 and 6 would still vote here at the Glen Road. So it would be precincts 1 to 4 under the proposal that was provided that would potentially vote at another location.
Thank you. It'd be double what we have at that particular school if that happened.
Right, so the Boutwell and the Wildwood would be combined to vote at the high school under the proposal.
Yes, Ms. George.
I would just like to say, this is going to be the first year that we'll have early voting in November, and it will be highly publicized, advertised by the Secretary's office and myself. And if we can even shave 2 or 3% off of the general voting population to come in 10 days prior, there's no excuse. You don't have to be out of town like absentee balloting. But this is going to be the very first time that early voting will be tried. And I think it's going to be a great success because people are going to think, I don't want to stand in lines, I don't want to, look around for parking spaces. So that is one added incentive this year where we've never had that incentive before.
Thank you. Judy, do you have more that you wanted to offer? Okay. If anybody else wants to chime in, now would be the time. Otherwise, and if we're done with conversation, I suspect that I'd be willing to listen to someone make a motion, if that's the pleasure of the board.
If you want, I'd make a motion that we keep the voting process the way we're doing it as of today, with the precincts, 2 precincts at the Wildwood, 2 precincts, I believe, at the Town Hall, and again, at what I believe at the Boutwell School. Let's keep it the way it is.
Second.
So I have a motion from Mr. McCoy and a second from Mr. Newhouse. Is there further discussion on that point? I see none, so all in favor of the motion as made? I'll vote in favor as well. It is unanimous. We do appreciate, speaking on behalf of the board, and I think I can do that, we certainly do appreciate you bringing it to our attention and recognize that it was, I guess, your duty to articulate your concerns and your observations, and we certainly respect and welcome you here for any matter of business at any time, and thank you very much for taking the time to be here.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Take just a second here. Very well, so it's our 7:45 scheduled appointment with Chief Michael Bagonis with recommendations relative to a potential panhandling bylaw. Chief Bagonis, thank you very much for being here this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So, I'll sort of turn it over to you, and we'll see what your recommendation is and engage in some conversation.
Certainly, I was asked a couple months ago, I know a member of the board had raised the issue about developing a bylaw relative to panhandling, especially specific to the events that have happened in the past at the town plaza. It was my knowledge at the time that that would probably be a little difficult to pull off because of the recent events, most pointedly in Lowell, as well as Worcester, and in Maine, where they had some issues out of the First Circuit relative to a First Amendment right to solicit for money in that fashion. So I wrote a recommendation that I didn't think it would be prudent for the town to develop a bylaw per se. But not being a legal expert, I also asked that town council probably give us some advice on it as well. There are some options that we do have, and I did list in my memo to the town manager regarding panhandling and when it goes too far. Of recent past, we haven't had many panhandlers that I've seen in town, or nor that I've gotten many reports of that were causing any difficulty. The reality of it is obviously if they're out there accosting folks in the traveling lane, there are things that the police department can do. If they become a problem with that over a period of time, the property owner could establish a no trespass order. So there are mechanisms that we could use. Quite frankly, we haven't had to use them in recent past because there really hasn't been anybody down there doing that. Not to say that they couldn't, begin again and start and come back, but I think that we have to balance that First Amendment privilege along with, the needs of the residents. And I think at this point, it would be prudent that we would probably hold off on that bylaw.
Thank you very much. Jeff, I saw you, did you have
Yeah, I
something from
would,
council, or?
Yes, actually, town council echoes the chief's comments, noting that he strongly recommends against trying to establish a panhandling bylaw in light of a couple of cases, ordinances in Worcester and Lowell were recently invalidated by 2 federal judges in Massachusetts. The ACLU has been particularly aggressive at pursuing these types of bylaws and ordinances, and so it is his recommendation that not to go forward with such a bylaw.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to probably just poke out a couple of quick observations or questions. I know in your memo to us, Chief, you brought to our attention that the U.S. District Court of Massachusetts ruled that the act of panhandling is protected under the First Amendment as free speech. And it was interesting. That would never have occurred to me. It doesn't strike me as a free speech action, but as I gave it further consideration, I could see how that could be interpreted that way. I think from my perspective, I get why there is a desire to minimize the presence of panhandlers or homeless folks or whatever the case might be from being at the plaza and making shoppers maybe feel uncomfortable, maybe unsafe. So I can understand the desire to try to minimize that. It doesn't seem fitting with the type of community that we are. On the other hand, I think there's merit to the idea of us being aware of and hopefully sensitive to the issues of the underprivileged and those that are in need. So, I've wrestled with that a little bit, and the observations you've made, obviously, I weigh very heavily, so thank you for bringing that to our attention. I guess I'll open it up to conversation or questions from any of my colleagues here on the board. I'll start to my right if there are any questions.
I don't have any questions.
I'm good, thank you for coming.
No, I'd just say I wish we had a little bit more teeth, but I can understand and respect the courts. I know there's at least 5 people up here that make less than $5 a week, so maybe you might see one of us down there. Now we know we won't get arrested, so we get about $20, $50 a year, and I think we all do a fantastic job. Some of us only get $250 a year. Thank you.
Ms. O'Connell, anything to add to that?
I don't know where to go from here. But I would just say thank you very much for taking this from a board member and following through with it. So, I was enlightened by the information. I can't say that I'm entirely surprised, but I appreciate you looking into it and making the recommendation that you did.
Thank you. My observation would simply be, or I don't want to say recommendation, but I think it might be just a good idea for all residents to be patient with folks as we encounter them. If we are faced with that again in the better weather, to be conscious and conscientious and patient and do the best we can to be good neighbors and good citizens. Jeff, did you have something to offer there? Or
No, I'm good.
Okay, very well. So,
If I might, I invite all citizens that if they have any questions or concerns, certainly reach out to the police department, have a conversation with us. If there is something going on, we don't mind going down and having a conversation with some of the folks that are down there. Some of them have pretty sad or interesting stories, and we do offer them help. So it gives us an opportunity to engage with them if we don't see it on site, to give us a shout, and we'll go down and have a conversation, see if there's something we could do to help out.
Chief, may I ask you, in your experience, are these folks that we have had, and I don't want to make it sound like we have some type of an epidemic going on here. It's been fairly isolated, but when we've had folks that have been there, are they from Wilmington, or are they coming into town because they believe that this is a better spot than other spots that they've found to do that activity?
My recollection of the recent past is that they were from a local community, not from Wilmington.
Okay.
But, obviously, they've shared experiences with Wilmington and other communities. And, it's something that you see a lot more of in today's day and age. It's a sad testament to where some people's lives are at this point. But, I think that Wilmington's always been a community that will step up and reach out and try to help. So I guess from the police department's perspective, we'll take that task on.
Very well.
Okay.
Again, thank you for bringing it to us tonight and for being here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chief. Oh, yeah.
So we're, if I've done my math right here, we're under communications, so I will turn it over to Town Manager, Mr. Hull.
The first item under communications is a letter from Dan Veerman. Mr. Veerman, in his letter, describes his efforts. This is with regard to the request by the July 4th committee for a special permit from the Board of Appeals. Mr. Veerman, as you know, is a member of the Board of Appeals. In his correspondence, he describes his efforts to protect the direct abutters' interests from any damages that may be associated with the carnival being potentially located at the Swain School property. He describes in his letter a meeting he had with Scott Garant, the two chiefs, and myself in advance of a informational forum. And during that meeting, he was seeking that either the town fiesta or the July 4th committee provide insurance and a bond for any potential damages that may be inflicted upon the direct abutters. He goes on in his correspondence to describe a meeting following the January 13th Board of Appeals meeting in which he suggested that the town fiesta or the committee, as an alternative, contribute up to $20,000 to a fund that would pay the costs associated with damages to abutting property. And then he notes that the chairman of the July 4th committee, Scott Garant, and I rejected this proposal, and he's seeking to have the proposal considered by the Board of Selectmen. Next, under correspondence, we have a reply. This is a reply from the town to the Surface Transportation Board regarding the EPA letter of November 6th, 2015. This all deals with New England Transrail's effort to have the Surface Transportation Board consider NET's proposal. The letter was actually drafted by Dan Deutsch from Town Council's office on behalf of the town, based upon collaboration with staff from my office and the town, Geo Insight, and Dan as well. The Surface Transportation Board provided an opportunity through January 14th for interested parties to file comment regarding EPA's letter. The letter that was submitted makes a note about a number of things, the uncertainty and contradictions that still surround the Superfund site, including the integrity of the subsurface containment area that was ordered to be constructed when DEP was involved. Also suggests there's still investigation and study to be completed, and the public right to comment on those findings, and that should occur before the Surface Transportation Board takes up this matter. Goes on to remind the Surface Transportation Board that in June of 2012, they deferred their environmental review pending EPA's issuance of a record of decision, and we note in this letter that there is no urgency for the Surface Transportation Board to change their position. It points to the lack of detail that continues to surround NET's proposal. There's also a supporting document that's contained in this correspondence from Geo Insight that points to many unanswered questions about the Superfund site and also raises some inaccuracies with regard to EPA's November 6th letter. So the next step at this point is that the STB will consider comments and then, it's my understanding, issue a decision as to whether to go forward with NET's consideration of their proposal or to stay there or remain consistent with their existing decision. Don't have a time frame on that, but we'll certainly be monitoring that. The last item under correspondence is a note from the Mass Bay Transportation Authority notifying the public of a series of public meetings to receive input about proposals to change the fares for transit on the T and also change the commuter schedule. The closest meeting to Wilmington is actually in Concord at the Town Hall from 6 to 8 p.m. on January 28th. Also, there's a meeting at the State Transportation Building in their library, 10 Park Plaza, Boston. Meeting runs from 5 to 7. And there's also a way to submit comments to the T, so you can submit comments in writing to the MBTA 10 Park Plaza, Boston, 02116, attention Fare Proposal Committee or Commuter Rail Schedule Committee, or email at fareproposal@mbta.com, and then they reference a phone number is 617-222-3200. And that is all I have under correspondence.
Thank you, Mr. Hull. We do have two board to consider items. The first is a request from Deborah Cipriani, the recreational director, to use the town common and gazebo for the summer concert series on Wednesdays, July 6th, July 13th, July 20th, and July 27th. Rain dates Thursday, July 7th, 14th, 21st, and 28th respectively. Did I summarize that okay?
Yes.
Cool. I love that we're talking about July here in January. It makes me feel warm just thinking about it. So is there a motion to that effect? Or are there concerns or questions about any of the dates or security or anything?
The dates are clear on our end.
Great.
Move the grant to request.
Second.
Made and seconded. For any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Unanimous. Look forward to those. Thank you. And Jeff, I'll turn it over to you to sort of lay the groundwork for our board to consider from Mr. Veerman for the 4th of July committee.
So just to recap, the letter that was submitted to the board is dated January 20th. It provides a description from Mr. Veerman's perspective of efforts on his part to address some concerns on behalf of some of the neighbors that abut the Swain School property. There was a meeting before the Board of Appeals on January 13th. That hearing was to consider whether to issue the special permit. As you recall, just to step back a bit, the last 2 years, the July 4th, Fun on the 4th, has been held over at the Shriners Auditorium, and that was due to the fact that the high school was under construction. The fields were off limit. Back in 2013, the attempt was made at that time to have the carnival located at the Swain property. The Board of Appeals rejected that proposal. The event did take place on the Common. It was, I think, for anybody who was there, a very different event than the one that people had become used to over the prior 30-plus years. So the last 2 years, it was at the Shriners. There clearly seemed to be a sentiment that was expressed by many, certainly to me, and I think, I don't want to speak for the July 4th committee, but I think they would agree, to try to bring the event back to the town common. I've had a number of discussions with Scott Grant, the chair of the July 4th committee. There was some initial discussion about trying to locate the carnival over at the high school in the parking lot. There were concerns that I expressed, as well as Superintendent DeLay, about using the school parking lot in part because of the current configuration of the parking lot. There's traffic islands there. We've got new lighting fixtures, new landscaping. There was consideration about potentially putting some of the rides out on the outfield. Again, some of the concerns there was noted by the Public Works Superintendent, or Public Works Director, that the area out in right field previously, prior to the new high school being constructed, was the leaching field for the old high school. So again, there were some concerns that locating the rides there would potentially create some problems for the outfield. So it ultimately came down to this location, the former Swain School site, as the potential site for a carnival, with the idea that all of the various elements of the July 4th event could be incorporated into the common area. I think from one perspective, the potential of having the carnival in that location is helpful from a police perspective, because the focus can be on that side of the common, as opposed to in prior years when it was all spread out. It was a little bit more difficult for the police to contain or to monitor. Clearly, there's, I think we can all appreciate, and I certainly appreciate, the concerns of the neighbors. It is a compact area there, but we've attempted to work through that. I know the July 4th committee had put together a proposal that scaled down the number of rides, curtailed the hours to some measure that the event would be running. So this letter is based upon a proposal that Mr. Veerman put forward to us back, it was, I guess, late December, I think, when we met. The two chiefs and Scott and I met, and Dan came in, and he indicated that he believes strongly that there needed to be some kind of mechanism to compensate or make sure that any of the direct abutters would not be financially impacted. And I understand that perspective. I certainly appreciate where he's coming from. Unfortunately, what he was proposing was just not attainable. And in fact, his own, the agent that he was using to obtain information ultimately agreed that the third-party indemnification he was looking for was not available. I certainly, as the town manager, can't recommend that the town indemnify abutters to the property, because I think it establishes a bad precedent. If we do it here, any number of other activities that the town is affiliated with or supports, neighbors in those areas could potentially be looking for indemnification. So, and again, I've talked to town council about this, and he's in full agreement that this is not something the town should be doing. So we met most recently with Mr. Veerman back, I guess, on the 19th, I believe it was, and he was offering a proposal at that point to that the town, Fiesta, and or the July 4th committee come up with a fund of $20,000, and that fund be used to for, I guess, abutters to access if they had damage. Again, I don't believe that the town should be contributing to that kind of a fund, in part because of the precedent. I also have a number of questions, and I don't have the answers specifically, but when you establish a fund like that, what are the implications in terms of Who runs it? Is there some kind of a nonprofit that has to run that? Are there tax consequences, filings with the IRS, audits required? I suspect it isn't just as easy as, putting cash in a savings account and then drawing it out. Somebody's going to have to be tasked with the responsibility of determining what claims are appropriate and which claims are inappropriate, and so there's, some administration involved in that. So that's kind of a history of where we are, and I would also note that Scott Grant submitted a letter, received it this morning, that also addresses the issue and outlines the July 4th committee's efforts to try to accommodate the concerns of residents.
Thank you, Jeff. So the board to consider item then is, I'm not 100% clear, but my understanding of it is that Mr. Veerman would like for the town to in some way be a sponsor of or establish an escrow fund that is in the amount of $20,000 that is made up of contributions from, well, I don't think he really cares where the money comes from. He makes the observation that that he would like it to be funded by Fiesta Shows. I think the 4th of July committee has indicated that's unlikely that they would fund it, at least fully anyway. And so Mr. Veerman makes some suggestions that it be partially funded by the town, partially funded by some fundraising, the 4th of July committee, Fiesta Shows, and whoever else. Nevertheless, I think the board to consider matter here is whether or not the town should, A, be involved at all in the establishment of this kind of a fund, and if we're not involved in the establishment of it, should we be involved at all in funding such a fund? And I don't know, is that a reasonable?
Yes, I think that's fair.
So that's the discussion to be had. I can go down the line, or if someone has observations and they want to be first, raise a hand and I'll recognize you. So,
I just want to say,
Please do.
because I'm on the 4th of July committee, I'm just going to abstain.
okay. Thank you, Lou.
I'd say, Mike, I understand emotions get high, but I do have to support the town manager and the town's position because, like he said, if we did something to this particular venue, we're going to have to do it to everybody. And I don't think we're in the position to put the town liable with these endeavors. I mean, we're having a great time in doing sort of things. That's what it's all about. We have great volunteerism in this community, and I do support the manager and his position on what he stated. It's the right decision.
Thanks, Mike.
I have a question. First of all, from my perspective, the interest in requiring some sort of financial assurance mechanism by the Board of Appeals or any board or committee, that's pretty common. And I'm clear from this correspondence and from what I've heard from others, I've spoken to Mr. Veerman, my take on it is that I'm not familiar with the economics of the carnival and that venture that will be, if the special permit is passed, will be in that location for a matter of days. But I guess I'm having trouble understanding why the company that is that's going to be profiting from that is the company opposed to a financial assurance mechanism. I'm gleaning that it is. I apologize. I have Mr. Grant's communication here that we just got at 7 o'clock tonight. So I've tried to review this, but I guess my question is, before the board even considers whether or not it would participate in a financial assurance mechanism, to me, the threshold question is, the company that's profiting from this, has that been proposed to them? And if so, what is the response? And so I guess I would ask the town manager or or Mr. Grant or anybody who can answer that question.
Yeah, Scott, I'm sorry to call you out. You're in the room, so since you are.
I'm here, and
Mr. Newhouse, in response to your 7 o'clock comment, I apologize. I've been out of the country since just after our meeting with Mr. Veerman. I got back 2.5 hours ago. So while on vacation, I wrote that lengthy response.
Just before you start, Scott, that wasn't a...
No, I know it's not.
directed at you.
Yep, I understand.
I understand you submitted it to the town in the most expeditious manner you could. I get that. That wasn't a shot at you.
No,
but the
and
reality is...
it wasn't taken as such.
Okay.
I think what the threshold we're going over is that this is even necessary. And then we're getting to this discussion, that a bond from the Board of under the Board of Appeals process, a bond to be posted, insurance to be posted, a fund to be set up is even necessary. Chief Pagonis has stated on more than one occasion at the public information session, at the Board of Appeals hearing, that there just are not the incidents that Mr. Veerman has referred to during this celebration. As Town Manager Hull mentioned, there is a concentration of people who work in Chief Pagonis's department. So, assuming for the sake of argument that we step over that threshold, that this is even necessary, I've spoken to Fiesta while on vacation. They're willing to establish a fund up to $10,000 to address Mr. Veerman's concerns, again, now that we've crossed that threshold. But there are obviously a great deal of questions that need to be answered that we discussed with Mr. Veerman on the 19th. At no point in time did I say to Mr. Veerman that they would not do it. Fiesta was not in the room. They were not participating in the meeting. I said, I think it's probably unlikely. Turns out they're willing to work to set up a fund, but there are many questions that have to be answered. For example, who will administer it? As the town manager said, what types of claims will be considered? What amounts will be considered? What relationship does this fund have to a homeowner's insurance policy? And is there any effect on that? Will the insurance company be looking to step in and come after the committee, come after Fiesta, come after the town? Because we've had these discussions. How do you deal with fraudulent claims? If they come up, what sort of verification will the administrator of this fund need in order to determine whether a claim should be paid? What's the window for filing a claim? What type of claims are we dealing with? Again, are we dealing with claims that can't be assigned to a certain individual as having caused the damage or the vandalism? There's a great deal of questions that have to be answered. And in one meeting with Mr. Veerman, where he puts this initially on the table and then walks out of the room because he didn't like that we didn't say, yes, we'll do it, we need time to consider these things.
Okay. Well, from I certainly understand the many questions that Mr. Grant just raised. I think those are the questions that you would ask when you're trying to create some sort of financial assurance mechanism. The reality is that I'm not trying to substitute my judgment for any members of the Board of Appeals, but I also acknowledge that, you know, I'm well aware of the general community interest in this. I'm also aware of the fact that the Board of Appeals, as the special permit issuing authority, has certain criteria that they're supposed to consider. And certainly, you know, a consideration of the impacts that it potentially could have on the neighborhood is central to that consideration. And I just feel as though there's always a difference between I think and I feel. I think that that certainly that sort of profit-generating enterprise, if a member of the Board of Appeals can feel comfortable about casting a vote in favor of it, provided that there is some financial assurance mechanism, then I think we ought to be trying to solve that problem. I mean, I'm not here to challenge any member of the Board of Appeals' judgment as to whether or not that's necessary. I think that the Board of Selectmen should try and help solve this problem if we can. And when I say solve the problem, what I'm describing as a problem is that a member of the Board of Appeals seems intent on having some financial assurance mechanism that will help to mitigate or to resolve, impacts that might have, that the event could have on the abutters. If we can somehow address that, I think it's incumbent on us to do that. And so to me, I think it's positive to hear Mr. Garant say that, subject to, many of those questions that he has, that the entrepreneur is prepared to put up $10,000 to some fund, to some mechanism. I see Mr. Grant's hand up, so let me.
I just want to respond to the emphasis that you're placing on money-making venture, entrepreneur. The bands that play on the Common Forest are paid, the fireworks contractor is paid, the clowns on Family Day are paid, the family entertainer on Family Day is paid. Carnival's not the only one there making a buck, if you will. Obviously, they would be the most significant, but they're not the only one.
Oh, yeah, believe me, I don't have a problem with capitalism. God bless them. They're in business to make a buck. But I guess my point is that, it's actually pretty common. I mean, it's commonplace for the planning board to give certain approvals and, for subdivisions and whatnot, but there's a financial mechanism in place that assures that if it doesn't get completed and done the right way, it gets completed. There are various mechanisms in place to make sure that, I think the history of the Board of Selectmen is to impose certain conditions. I believe the Board of Selectmen years ago, when confronted with a similar situation, and Mr. McCoy might remember better than I believe the Board of Selectmen was the board that had an agreement with the developers of Shawshene Commons. And when that development wasn't completed, even though it was a comprehensive permit, when that wasn't completed, that's how the town sought redress and protected the folks who had already purchased in there. So I don't think that this concept is at all new. I don't think that the concept is is rare. I think the reality is that we've got a Board of Appeals member who's trying to come up with different ways to create a financial assurance mechanism. So I guess the question for the board is, what can we do tonight? We're hearing from Mr. Garant that it appears as though Fiesta, if some of those questions can be satisfied, is in a financial position to be able to provide that financial assurance. So what else can we do? Is anybody?
I've come to, if I may, I'm just, and Judy, I'm going to run down to you here in a second. Forgive me. I feel as though I've come to very much the same conclusion you have, Mike, but I feel like I'm stopping at the point, and you haven't suggested it, so I don't mean to say that you said something that you didn't, but I feel like I'm stopping at the point that the town would be either an administrator or a contributor to some type of an account. Because there are so many questions, and I fear the precedent, notwithstanding your citing there, that it's not uncommon in a planning scenario or maybe in other special permitting issues to have a contingency or some protection there. But the nuance of this is that there's 9 direct abutters, and there's no script in place for how does this money get accessed, by whom, who decides how much, what are the criteria for the management of this fund in whatever form it takes. That all being said, I want to go on record and say that I'm complimentary of Mr. Veerman looking for a way, at least in my opinion, I believe that he's looking for a way to accommodate the protection that he feels is necessary for those 9 direct abutters, and convey a yay vote for the carnival at that site, even though it's against his better judgment. he's made it very clear, I don't want to speak for Mr. Veerman, but he's made it very clear in meetings and in conversations that irrespective of whether this fund comes into place or not, that he doesn't think it's a good idea for the carnival to be there. But he has said he's willing to give it a yes vote if there's some mechanism for protection in place. And, this recommendation came about. So I want to say, notwithstanding the fact that it's been a challenge and there have been some heated conversations, I think that the fact that we've been having this conversation right now is a testament to some patience that's been exhibited on both sides of this discussion. But I'm wrestling with, and I don't feel comfortable at all endorsing the town getting into the business of funding and administering an account that has no script for access, and not to mention the fact that it's both recommended by our town manager as well as our town council that we stay away from that kind of a thing. So I weigh that pretty heavily too. That said, I'd love to see that account, and I'm starting to feel more and more like, and sorry, that if Fiesta is willing to put up 10,000, that perhaps through some creative fundraising and other mechanisms, the 4th of July Committee and some other organizations around town might be willing to do some hard work to raise 10 more thousand and create an account.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, that is not on the table.
Okay.
We're looking at $10,000 from Fiesta if they're satisfied as to the terms of how the fund is administered.
Okay, so what you're saying is not on the table is,
20,000.
well, that seems to be a number that Mr. Veerman feels comfortable with. So you're saying that you would counter to 10? I don't want to speak for anybody here.
Mr. Behrman, during the Board of Appeals hearing, said that he would negotiate with the committee. I objected to the use of that word. However, we will do what we can, as we have been, to satisfy him and his requests, his demands, since December 28th, when both chiefs, Jeff Hull and myself, met.
Is the 4th of July Committee amenable to being the administrator? Is that the word? The administrator of this account? Or you? I mean, I know that the discussion among us here is to determine whether or not the town should be, involved or the administrator of this account.
We as a committee have not had that discussion, have not met. As I said, the meeting with Mr. Behrman was last Tuesday. Thursday morning I went out of town. We can have that discussion, but I think if this fund is to be established, it is best administered by an independent third party who can evaluate claims and see that the requirements for submitting a claim and having it paid are being followed.
Thank you. I want to make sure everyone gets an opportunity to speak. Judy, I haven't heard from you, and not that you need to, but.
Hearing all the points that have been made, there's a $20,000 request by Mr. Veerman. I think it would be helpful to know what his viewpoint is on the $10,000 offer, because if that is not amenable, proportional to his request, then to me it's a non-starter.
Right.
Just to kind of get right to the root of it.
Well, may I ask you, Judy, and you don't have to necessarily answer because maybe the answer will come in the form of a vote, so I don't want to cheat. But irrespective of the number of the dollar value, do you have a feeling at this point about whether the town should be involved in this account?
Well, I think that we're looking for, a perfect solution to an imperfect situation, and I think that there isn't one. And I think that the concerns that have been raised by the town manager and through our legal team, that it's not something that the town should engage in. I think as a sitting selectman, I would be, in favor of supporting that recommendation that we would not be involved. I want to say just, as a point of fact, and I can't give the metrics, but, the town is supporting this event through other means, through funding, the police and fire and support personnel and DPW and whatever team members I haven't included in that, I apologize, but I feel that the town is doing a share in terms of a financial contribution already. And obviously, the request to use town land would come before the board. And, I believe that the nonprofits and 4th of July being one of them are making, a financial contribution. I do want to say for the record that I understand that Mr. Veerman is trying to do the job that he was appointed to do. And he was, these members of the Board of Appeals are put in there to keep watch for these things and to bring up these pertinent discussions and issues. So I understand that, and I can see both sides of the equation, and I understand that, we can have this discussion back and forth, but I think if we're going to use the word negotiate, and I understand that there's mixed feelings about that word, what I see is a proposal for $20,000 that a counteroffer for $10,000 is being presented, subject to parameters in place. I think where it all boils down to is that a non-starter for Mr. Vameron or not? Because I think if we can't resolve the number, the terms and conditions that go along with the dollar value are a moot point if that number threshold is not satisfactory. And I was at the meeting, when it was discussed at the Board of Appeals, and, I don't want to speak for Mr. Vameron, but what I took away from the conversation was that, short of having that financial mechanism in place to protect those abutters, which he feels very passionate about, that is his role and responsibility, that he will not issue his vote. That's what I took away from it.
Yeah,
So-
I was there and heard the same and had the same observation. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I have
Yeah,
a
please,
question.
Mike.
I'm generally, I have the general understanding that, that the operator of the carnival makes money and then contributes money to the 4th of July. The 4th of July committee, in addition to donating all your time, donates funds to offset the costs of the fireworks and the event in general. Do I have that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Well,
So,
we don't donate money, we raise money to pay for those expenses.
okay, pay for those expenses directly, so it doesn't get donated to the town and then the town pays it. You pay certain expenses.
Correct.
And I've always had the understanding that it's primarily the fireworks that costs all the money, and the town absorbs, public safety costs and DPW costs, et cetera. Is that simplifying it too much, or is that true?
It's somewhat. The fireworks is obviously the biggest check we write.
Right.
But there's a great deal more expense that goes into the celebration than just the fireworks.
Okay, all right. But understanding that, I have a suggestion. We've talked in the past about being prepared to be able to fund this event regardless of what iteration it might take. Why don't we do the best that we can on behalf of the town to put the Board of Appeals and the 4th of July Committee in a position to answer some of those questions by appropriating $10,000 at town meeting for the 4th of July festivities? I mean, so that, in essence, if that money is necessary, can be used to bridge the gap. So in other words, if the operator of the carnival, between now and the Board of Appeals meeting, says, we couldn't come to terms, or, 10,000 is the most we can do, the margins are too tight, we can't come up with any more, well, that frees them up to release some more money for that purpose, to go take care of that, and by whatever mechanism they can work out with the 4th of July committee, but the money is there to be able to fund the balance of the costs. I mean, so I guess is there when we look at the public sentiment to try and make this a reality, 10 grand in our budget doesn't seem to me to be a reach.
So, may I-
Go ahead.
Sorry, I'll come right to you, Judy. May I ask you, Mike, for me, my concern over this was never about the dollar value. So I support the idea that we should, or it's reasonable for us to consider appropriating some funds. And I don't think those funds are exorbitant. Where I hiccup is to what? What is this account? I guess I don't want us to move the funds from the general fund into another account, some escrow account, that the town of Wilmington maintains or administrates.
Yeah, that's the
But we did it in 2014 based on the uncertainty of the location, the amount of revenue that might be generated, and the amount of revenue that would then be available from private entities to be able to pay for some of the costs that we're talking about. And we appropriated 15,000, if memory serves me. So, you know, and I think we were kind of hedging our bet if that money was necessary for the festivities. And my memory is that it was a general appropriation for the 4th of July activity. So I guess my point is, if the town is prepared, though might not be necessary, depending on what they can negotiate, but if the town is prepared to make a financial commitment to the 4th of July festivities, up to $10,000, now that may provide the room for them to go negotiate what they want to negotiate. We're not stuck being an escrow holder. We're not stuck being, you know, kind of wrestling over some of the details that Mr. Grant raised and that Fiesta would raise. Just let them go do it and let the Board of Appeals do their job and see if they can work out a financial mechanism. And if in the end they know that there's a $10,000 appropriation from town meeting, which is there if we need it to offset those costs, that may be the solution.
Here's a question, the timing is, you know, we have a February 10th hearing with the Board of Appeals.
Yep.
We need to get a resolution. Town meeting is first Saturday in May?
April
This
30th.
This won't be voted until then? We can't make that commitment to the Board of Appeals.
Well, I guess then you guys would have to take that into consideration when you try and work something out. But I mean, as I sit here and the level of attention that this has gotten, to think that a $10,000 appropriation wouldn't get through town meeting and that the 4th of July festivities could count on it, then shame on us if we can't get that vote, you know?
Contingency?
Can I just ask, in terms of this 10,000, is your intention to just appropriate $10,000 to provide to the July 4th committee to essentially supplement or support the efforts of the committee with regard to the July 4th activity? So just kind of a general appropriation, not specifically directed to any particular purpose, but the committee could use it for adding to this fund or for paying for DJs or doing whatever they want?
Anything. I mean, here's our stack of bills for the event. Can you pay 10,000 of it? Well, yeah, we can pay 10,000 of the the fireworks bill, the band, any number of other vendors that get paid to be there, and it's just a general appropriation like we did 2 years ago. I can't believe it's that long ago. So I guess what I'm saying is that frees up the parties to be able to try and work out some of the issues that have been raised that are legitimate, but let the Board of Appeals and the applicant, the operator, let them all work that out. But knowing that those are the only issues, it's not financial, because if those other issues can be worked out, and Fiesta is agreeing to 10, in reality they have another 10 in room now because they're not, through the 4th of July committee, subsidizing those activities. I mean, it's a legitimate municipal expense.
So in your model, if that were to go forward, that's an appropriation of funds that goes out, but there's this discussion that was before us tonight to talk about the establishment of an account we've almost kind of changed the discussion a little bit.
Yeah, it'd be moot based on the information that's being presented tonight, and if the town is committed to that $10,000 appropriation, I gotta believe we can do that. And I envision, people saying, okay, problem solved. Now let the Board of Appeals, its individual members as a group, deal with the applicant. It's not a question of money now, it's a question of just packaging
Their
it.
logistics for this account.
We don't have to encroach on their jurisdiction.
It's, please do, yes.
Two questions. First one is, for the sake of this discussion, how are we settling on the $20,000 number?
I'm not presuming to settle on the 20,000, but I'm, to the point that Ms. O'Connell made earlier, we've got a member of the Board of Appeals who's indicating 20,000 is his number. We've got information through you saying it's 10. Okay, what's the number? At least we're covering that delta. I mean, so at least the money's there. It's about the form and how you deal with it.
Okay, and the second question is, and I frankly don't know the answer to this, Mr. Hull, from a town expenditure standpoint, would we have to then work in conjunction with the town to put the fireworks out to bid, to put the bands out to bid, to put the clowns out to bid?
I don't believe so. If the town, so as I understand the proposal, I guess as of July 1, the town would cut a check to the July 4th committee for $10,000 as a contribution to the event. And you can do with the money as you choose. I don't believe that there would be any requirement for the July 4th committee to necessarily go through a public procurement process. I mean, I can check on that, but I don't think that would be the case. So I guess then, if it turns out, as has been suggested, that this $20,000 fund in all likelihood doesn't get attached, so to speak, or people don't file claims against it, the 10,000, I mean, is this a $10,000 fund that we would now budget every year, or?
No.
Well, I guess I wouldn't want to predict what happens between now and a year from now, but I guess I would say that if there are no claims and that fund is still there, then there's no need to, nobody needs to subsidize any portion of it next year, right? Whether it's private enterprise or otherwise. But
Yeah, I think the presumption is there's no claims, and the money either, I mean, it goes back to the 4th of July committee and they reopen an account next year, or it just stays in escrow for a year.
right.
I don't mean to answer for you, but that was my understanding. I'm sorry, it's not really a public hearing, but we have a small audience, and I think there's some folks that had their hands up. So, Mr. West, you had indicated you wanted to ask.
Thank you. Frank West, 2 Birchwood Road. I was at the meeting on the 13th, and first of all, one of the things I'd like to commend Jeff Hall on his composure. Because to be honest with you, I felt, I wasn't there at the meeting, I watched it 3 times on the television, and I see Mr. Vanderman, for lack of a better term, my words, holding the town hostage. Because he basically was saying, hey, if you're not going to pay for somebody's broken window, I'm not going to vote for this. The direct question back to you folks would be, where does it stop? Right now you're talking about 9 abutters. What about the guy on School Street that said, and it was one of his closing comments, well, I guess I'll see you when my picture window gets broken. He's not a direct abutter, so where does it end? And the thing also is, I would agree with Mr. Durant in that Fiesta Shows isn't the applicant. Fiesta Shows isn't the only profit-making venture. The applicant is the 4th of July committee. So there are many people, be it the bands, the clowns, whatever, many people are making money, but the entire venture is a non-profit venture to support the town of Wilmington and all of the non-profits that participate in it. Granted, people are making money, both the for-profit companies as well as the non-profits, but I just feel that anything that you guys do to open up some sort of an account will snowball and set the town liable for other events. I mean, what happens when the Relay of Life goes into this neighborhood, or this, the whatever goes into another neighborhood? The Board of Appeals and this board here and the planning board going to request the same from, some sort of a bond from the other companies. And one last thing, if I will, is that if Fiesta Shows puts up 10 grand this year, I'm assuming that 10 grand, if it's not used, would go back to Fiesta Shows. They're not going to give it to you
in perpetuity. Am I correct in saying that?
They're on a year-to-year contract, so if there's no Wilmington contract for them, there's no funding from them.
Right, but what I'm saying is that they're willing to put up a bond for 10 grand.
It's not a bond.
Okay, they're willing to give you 10,000.
They're willing to establish a fund under certain parameters, and the questions that could be answered that I mentioned earlier, yes, if it's unused after the celebration, yes, that would go back to Fiesta, I presume.
Right, so again, you'd be looking at this next year and subsequent years with whomever your vendors are, and at a future year, they may not be as generous, or whoever the vendor or vendors are.
Potentially.
Yeah, I have an answer too, but I see Mr. Newhouse chomping at the
Yeah,
bit.
I mean, I just want to make sure there were a number of items there, and I just don't want to lose track of them before having the chance to respond. First of all, what I'm suggesting does not put the town involved in a sort of fund. That's exactly what I'm trying to avoid. That's number one. Number two, I didn't see the meeting, which has just been referenced. I wasn't there. But I will say that, you know, this town's history is replete with examples where, at the end of the day, we thank people on boards like the Planning Board and the Board of Appeals and others for insisting on a financial assurance mechanism when it ends up being necessary. So whether or not somebody wants to characterize that as holding an applicant hostage, doesn't matter to me how you characterize it. These kinds of financial assurance mechanisms often make sense, and they prove to be valuable in the end. The reality is, if we are able to establish a track record where some of these concerns prove to be unwarranted over the course of time, well, I guess this conversation becomes moot anyways. So I'm just trying to be a realist. We have a Board of Appeals with the authority to consider things like these. We have a member who has indicated a strong preference to do that. I think we have a solution. Let's solve the problem and let them go about the business of ironing out the details.
Yeah, my response to the concern about precedent and whether or not future events will come to the town asking for money to protect against broken or damage on property is mitigated by virtue of the fact that the town is making a contribution to the 4th of July committee for that committee to do with it as they see fit. They can choose to use that as a contribution towards paying for fireworks, or they can choose to take a portion of it and put it into some type of an escrow account. That's up to that committee to do that. And that committee is now, I think by virtue of what I would think that is Mr. Newhouse's proposal here, is that committee is now charged with hopefully sitting down with the Board of Appeals, maybe this individual member, and constructing a mechanism for creating this account, and whether it's a third party or some other agency that becomes the administrator under a set of rules for how money gets accessed. Again, that's none of our business, nor should it be our business, and that was my greatest concern coming into this meeting. I commend you, Mr. Newhouse, for bringing up this solution, because for me, hopefully, it's a pathway to a solution that brings the 4th of July celebration back to Wilmington, back to the center of Wilmington, where it belongs. So it's not perfect. I don't think that the fund is necessary, and I've made that clear. But in order to get us to that point, if this is a mechanism that keeps the town free from any precedent setting, and also gets the 4th of July celebration there and appeases or accommodates the Board of Appeals, then, you know, all parties are being served. So I commend you. Thank you. Joan, I'm sorry, you had a hand, but are you, okay?
I'm not sure we need a motion if the manager is clear on the request and believes that we can include that in the budget presentation, or the overall budget.
Right. From my perspective, the money, $10,000, is not the issue. It is, what has been the issue is becoming a party to some kind of a fund or putting up some kind of bond and essentially providing some measure of indemnification because of the, you know, aside from the precedent, it potentially impacts our tort liability cap. There's, you know, all kinds of other implications for being a party to covering someone's broken window or slashed tires or whatever might happen. So if the request is to budget $10,000 to make a contribution to the July 4th committee, from a dollars and cents standpoint, that's certainly attainable. Would it be so I guess this would be, at least for this year, the money is directed to the July 4th committee, and if it turns out they don't need the money, they still retain the money.
Well, I guess, I don't know the answer to that. I just remember in 2014, it was a general appropriation to be used for the 4th of July festivities.
Yeah, I think in that instance, because there was the prospect that the July 4th committee was not going to be able to offer a program that year, I was looking to appropriate a sum of money to be able to offer some kind of an event through means outside of the July 4th committee.
I guess I would respond this way. If the money's in the budget, town council and you and others, we can figure out how the article should read, right?
Yes.
So,
So I'm not clear. We had a board consider item. That doesn't ipso facto mean we have to take a vote. It seems to me like we've, through conversation, come to the conclusion that we're not going to establish an account owned or managed by the town. Is that a safe assumption to make?
It is from my standpoint.
Okay. I feel like that's reasonable. Now, the question is there a need for a motion to direct the manager to construct an article for town meeting, or would it be an article, or is it just a line item in the budget?
No, it would be an article.
It is, okay. So do we need to move for that?
How about this? Move that the Board of Selectmen support the appropriation of $10,000 to be applied to the 4th of July activities in accordance with an article to be prepared by the town manager and town council.
Motion has been made
I'd second that.
and seconded. Is there more discussion? All in favor of that motion? I'm in favor. It's 3 with 1 abstain. Thank you, Mike, for a creative solution. I hope that does get us where we all hope to go.
4 with 1 abstain, did you say? I thought you said 3 with 1 abstain.
1, 2, 3, 4 with 1 abstain. Did I say 3? If I said 3,
Yes.
it was a misstatement. Forgive me. So we are now, yeah, I'm sorry, please. You may.
Your appropriation and Mr. Newhouse's comments assumes that the 4th of July committee has a willingness, and I'm not yet committing to that on behalf of the committee, which hasn't had the conversation, to fund this account. So,
Fund the account, okay.
I think that's fair. You do have to take it back to your body and have a discussion.
correct.
Okay.
There's probably a implied contingency there. If it's a moot point, then the motion we just made goes away, and there won't be a need for the article. Is that fair, Mike? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't presume to speak either for the 4th Committee or for the Board of Appeals.
Very well. Again, thank you. We're under public comments. Yes, sir.
I was wondering if you could explain to me a little bit about the Board of Appeals, in that in this particular case, you've got a 5-member board. One person abstained for the vote because they had a conflict of interest, and now you've got a 4-person board hearing a particular case. And within that 4-person board, you have to have a supermajority, meaning it's either a 4-0 vote or anything under that will get defeated. There used to be alternates for Board of Appeals cases, and what I'm wondering is, A, why are there not alternates for cases, and B, is it something that the board would consider to reinstate alternates so that in the event that, because as an example, what if Mr. Vierman, as an example, as a quasi-abutter, what if he abstained as well? You'd have a 3-person board And by nature of a three-person board, you couldn't have a supermajority. You couldn't have the vote. So what I'm wondering is that would the board consider bringing on alternates to the Board of Appeals so that, not just in this case, but in any particular case where one or more member has to abstain, you could still have a proper vote and a proper discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. West. I know I had briefly mentioned to Mr. Hull in conversation that I had memory that there were alternates at one point, and he had indicated that that was switched. I'm sorry.
When it was a three-member board, and
Okay.
then there was this change to a five-member board.
So when we went to 5, the alternates became, it was perceived that they weren't as necessary.
I don't
because-
know the specific history members of the board may, but I just do recall that there was for quite some time a three-member Board of Appeals with alternates, and then it was changed. I presume it must have been a town meeting article, I don't recall specifically, but that changed it from 3 to 5.
It was, I can speak to that historically. If you have a Board of Appeals that's comprised of 3 members, and then you have associate members who are essentially, they fill in when the other people aren't available. And there was some appetite several years back to alleviate some of the logistical issues they were having with that setup. The general laws can enable towns to do business either way. The interesting thing is, even with the smaller boards, lots of times your votes had to be unanimous. So the greater number actually affords the opportunity to have 4-to-1 votes in a lot of cases, as opposed to just unanimous votes. So if memory serves me, that was one of the reasons why folks wanted to go this way. So the Board of Appeals is depending on whether they're sitting for comprehensive permits, it just requires a simple majority, or special permits or variances. Depending on which role they're filling dictates what the necessary vote is. So, neither system is perfect, but I know the town, through town meeting action, made a specific decision to get down this road several years back. Can't remember the year.
So you started to answer a question that I had. I don't mean to direct it right at you, but just through your historical memory, what are the criteria? And I don't mean to ask you this point blank, but this particular special permit requires a supermajority, but other permits don't require a supermajority. So what is there something that comes before them that tells them, okay, here's the kind of thing you're going to be hearing, and this particular deliberation will require a supermajority? How do they know?
Well, I mean, on this one, it's actually a unanimous vote of 4. If there's 4 out of the 5 presiding,
4 remaining, right?
there's a unanimous vote of the 4
Right.
required. So I know there's been talk of, Mr. Veerman's request being here, but, I mean, that,
I think
who knows
that's,
what the rest of the
part of the
board-
zoning bylaw, if I recall, that section that requires the 4 of 5 or 4 of 4, if it turns out to be.
It's interesting stuff. So this notion of and I appreciate the question, Frank, and I'll take it personally. I don't think we have an answer here tonight. I'm receptive to the idea of talking about alternates, but I think that that question has come up in the past, and it probably is easy to answer, but I don't have an answer for you tonight.
But I guess my request, Mr. Chairman, on this would be, my request would be as a resident for the board to consider having alternates on that board. Or if there's, and again, I'm not saying for this particular case, because obviously, if you were to consider alternates, it would have to be a vote at town meeting either this year or a future year. But I think it's important that you have this type of vote, because what if, as an example, what if you had only 3 people could stand on that board? Then the applicants, just by that matter, would have to stand in a no, I guess.
Well, there is a mechanism for, I forget the terminology for it, but we can, a vote of necessity or something. Is that the term? You know what I'm talking about? Where we can free someone
Under the
from.
conflict statute, people can participate out of necessity, or else no business could be done. So,
Precisely,
right.
yeah.
But in either case, Mike, if you will, again, I think you have a situation where You have boards, like, as an example, respectfully, Mr. Semaglia abstained from many votes regarding the 4th of July committee, specifically because he's a member of the 4th of July committee. Good call. So, so that left 4 of you to vote on whatever issues that we talked about earlier. So here's a prime example where people do have conflicts of interest because of either their business or social issues with the town. So again, I think it'd be imperative, I think it'd be a good idea for this board to consider putting an article at a town meeting, be it this year or next year, to allow alternates on the Board of Appeals when necessary.
I'll tell you what I'll do, Frank, and I mean this, is I will commit to taking this up in conversation with Jeff offline, and we'll flush it out a little bit. Perhaps we'll run it through council, and if it has merit and it's appropriate to bring back to the board, we'll do so. But I promise you that I will explore it.
And probably through Mr. Boyle as well, being the chairman of the committee, because he may or may not. I mean, he'd have a direct input into it one way or the other. He may say it's something that he desires as the chairman of that committee, or he might say, you know what, we're running good on it as we are.
Noted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, just briefly, real quick,
Please.
Mr. Newhouse's analogy, they went from 3 to 5. What did somebody, somebody conclude me that somebody abstained?
Right, so
Because you need
what-
4 out of the 5 now. Somebody abstained for the vote, conflict?
Mr. Loud, Ed Loud is a member of the Board of Appeals.
Yeah.
His employer apparently sells or leases generators to Fiesta. He's not involved at all in terms of the sales, somebody in the company that he works for. So he felt it would be best to abstain from any action on this.
I didn't know that, because
just because of the perceived.
I knew there was 5, and it was like 4 voting. All right, so.
And it was
Very good.
yeah.
All clear now.
We are still under public comments? Ms. Searfoss? Nothing? Very well. New business committee reports. Judy, I'll start down there if it's
I
all
don't
right.
have anything, thank you.
I'm good, thank you.
Mr. Newhouse.
All set, thank you.
It's unanimous.
Look at that, because you're stuck with me. I'll be incredibly brief. I had the very positive experience of being able to attend as the representative of the Board of Selectmen, the Mass Municipal Association Annual Meeting and Trade Show this past Friday and Saturday. It was all day Friday into the Friday evening, and then most of the day Saturday. Saturday I spent touring around quite a bit with Town Manager Hall. I had a page worth of takeaways. I'm not going to do that to you tonight. But I would suggest to you that the conference was full of a lot of really meaningful stuff. Opened by Governor Charlie Baker. I'll let Jeff talk to you about some of the monetary inputs that affect the town of Wilmington, but I was impressed with Governor Baker's presentation and his commitment to living up to his campaign pledges to fully fund unrestricted government aid in Chapter 90, et cetera. I participated in a couple of different breakout sessions, one with regards to creating age-friendly communities, and it was kind of consistent with the zoning, the creative zoning that Valerie came and spoke to us a few weeks ago, and creating mixed-use properties to be more conducive to smaller residential areas, et cetera. There was discussion of pipelines and gas supply versus electric versus a number of other shutdowns of nuclear and the dirty oil and coal burning plants. So, a lot of our sister communities around the Commonwealth are wrestling with many of the same issues we do on a day-to-day basis. But I don't want to blow over that sort of the closing event that I went to and I attended with Jeff was a pretty frank and heartfelt discussion on the opioid addiction problem in the Commonwealth that so many cities and towns are dealing with. And so the MMA produced a publication. What I will do is, I didn't get enough printout copies of this, but it is electronic as well, and I'll send you hyperlinks to download the PDF. It's a very comprehensive and well-written document, and they offer 10 steps that communities can start taking right away to sort of help be leaders in the charge against opioid addiction. So, Chief, I'll share that with you, and I'll also share it with you, my colleagues. But it was a very, it was a good meeting. I see Jeff has a plan plaque in front of him as well. So he and I were able to represent the town as the town was awarded a plaque for, I'm sorry, what's the excellence in loss control. So it was a very good meeting. I just want to let you know we were there. Oh, and more importantly than all that, I have swag for you. The Maya offers us a luncheon on Saturday, and there's a presentation there. That's where we won the award, but it's also where they offer us some interesting things. And this is for Beverly, if you don't mind. Jeff, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, the meeting, I attended the meeting on Friday. As Chairman Shampoo indicated, the town, this is the second time in a row now, the town was one of 10 communities that received the Excellence in Loss Control Award, which is issued by the Mass Interlocal Insurance Agency. We're one of the communities that have our insurance for auto, liability, property. There's the vast majority of cities and towns in the Commonwealth get their insurance through Maya. This recognizes the town for its efforts to reduce claims. We take advantage of a number of different programs that Maya offers in terms of training. We obtained a grant through Maya this year for purchasing some radios that have been made available in the school and some of the other departments. So it's one of the things that it's been a focus of mine for a long time, even pre-town manager, to try to work on ways that we can reduce our claims, because insurance premiums obviously track what your claims experience is. So if you can reduce your claims, you stand a good chance to contain your insurance costs. So I'm particularly proud to be the recipient of this for a second year, and I would quickly point out that it's really due to the efforts of a number of people. We have a safety committee that meets monthly. It's chaired by Jamie McGaldy, our Public Works Operations Manager, and also on the committee, Paul Ruggiero, Director of Administration and Finance from the School Department, Mary Palin, the Food Service Director, Brian Scouten from Public Buildings, Bob Richter, Deputy Police Chief, Gary Donovan, Deputy Fire Chief, Joe LeBeo, the Business Manager at DPW, Ken Ray Emerald, the Town Assistant Town Manager, and Beverly Dalton, the Administrative Assistant. So they meet on a monthly basis, and they're the ones that really develop the game plan in terms of what steps the town can be taking to reduce injuries and reduce claims. So hats off to them. In terms of the rest of the meeting, Governor Baker spoke on Friday about his planned budget, and one of the things that is certainly good to hear is that he is committing funds to the cities and towns in terms of local aid. It appears, based upon the numbers that we received, that the amount for Chapter 70, which is school aid, and the unrestricted general government assistance would be slightly higher under his proposal than we are currently receiving. So that's certainly good news. As you know, the House and Senate ultimately will come up with their own budgets, and typically there's discussion back and forth, and the numbers fall somewhere in the middle. So, you know, it's certainly positive news. I guess I'm taking it with some measure of reservation, given that there's a whole legislative process that has to occur between now and the end of the fiscal year. So, but he seems to be, and certainly his track record to this point has demonstrated he's very supportive of cities and towns, which is certainly helpful. I also attended the opioid session with the chairman and found it particularly interesting. They had a number of speakers from other communities that have been involved in the fight against substance abuse. Had some interesting comments. Many of the communities have gotten involved in coalitions with neighboring communities to try to address the issue. You know, it's clear that there's no easy answers to the problem. It's not a short-term issue. It's going to require resources and commitment for the long term. So that was an interesting session. The other session that I thought was kind of interesting dealt with, there was a speaker at the Maya lunch that talked about the implications for the self-driving vehicles. And it's some things that I really hadn't given a whole lot of thought to, but talking about the implications for cities and towns. These vehicles, in many cases, they're potentially could be some of them are already on the road in a test mode, if you will, but they could be sold by some of these companies as early as 2020. And what it means for cities and towns, the potential, on the one hand, for example, of these vehicles reducing the amount of auto accidents, which would certainly be helpful not only for the passengers, but also police departments having to spend less time dealing with accident scenes. But some of the other implications of it center around the fact that you would have these vehicles potentially that you literally program to drive you to work, and then you get out of the vehicle and the car drives back home. What does that mean in terms of the demand for vehicles? If the demand for vehicles drops off, that affects the town in terms of our revenue from motor vehicle excise tax. So it's just kind of an interesting to think about, and it's really not all that far off in terms of when these things will be available. It's kind of hard to imagine. I personally am not sure I would want to be in a vehicle that I didn't have any control over, but I suppose we'll see. So it was a good conference.
Thank you. Agreed. We are now under important dates.
Important dates, we have February 1st is the next meeting of the Board of Selectmen. I will be making the fiscal 17 budget presentation. February 2nd, the beginning of the Finance Committee meetings. Those meetings are held here in Room 9. First meeting will be the budget overview, information technology, revenue, and general government. Then again, Finance Committee meeting on February 4th, here in Room 9. Planning, Conservation, Building Inspector, and Board of Appeals, Board of Health. February 5th is the last day to submit petition warrant articles for inclusion on the warrant for April 30th of this year. April 8th is the next Board of Selectmen's meeting here in Room 9. April 9th, the Finance Committee meets again. Department of Public Works and Public Buildings. February 10th is the last day to register to vote in the presidential primary. February 11th, the Finance Committee meets again at the Memorial Library, the Banda Room, at 7 p.m. Recreation, Library, and Elderly Services. And then February 17th is the next Yentile Development Committee meeting here in Room 9 at 6:30.
All of those dates were in February, just to clarify. Thank you, Jeff. Unless there's anything else, I'd accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Made and seconded. All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. Thank you. Good night.